Everyone. Just going to wait a couple moments here to let everyone get into the room and get settled. Thank you so much for being here today. Okay, well, I don't want to wait too long because I know we have lots of really interesting things to chat about today and a great panel to chat about them with. So without further ado, I would like to welcome everyone to the Washington Library Association's Career Lab event, Why Work in Libraries. It's so wonderful to see you all today. I know that it's a beautiful day across Washington, so I appreciate you spending an hour with us this afternoon. Just a couple of housekeeping things. As you entered the Zoom room, you did enter muted. At the end of the session, we'll be able to unmute and ask questions if you like, and feel free to put questions in the chat at any time. This session will be recorded, and after the session, the link will be sent out to all registrants to be able to check it out later at your convenience. And just another tip for you, up at the right-hand corner of your screen, you'll see that little view box. We like to suggest you go into speaker view so that when the panel is speaking, you'll see that person featured there in the center. So to get us started today, I would like to introduce myself first here. My name is Brianna Hoffman, and I am actually the Executive Director of the Washington Library Association. And I also work as a project coordinator for OCLC's Web Junction program. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and send it over to Nancy, who is going to be our moderator today to get us going on the rest of our introductions.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for coming. I'm so happy you're here. My name is Nancy Garrett, and I'm a teen services librarian at Seattle Public Library. And I've worked at my library for 20 years now. So welcome. And I think both Sarah's and Tuesday are now going to introduce themselves.
Yeah, so afternoon, everyone. My name is Sarah Jones, and I am the quite new state librarian for the Washington State Library. Been there since mid-February. And prior to that, I've been a director in 3 public libraries, a state librarian in the state of Nevada. And I started my career as a children's librarian and youth services coordinator in a public library. So a pretty range of experience. So glad to be here.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Pate, and I also work at the Washington State Library. I'm closing in on about 2 years, and I'm a community outreach librarian, which means I've got 3 main projects. I co-manage the Washington Center for the Book with my colleague at Seattle Public Library, Linda Johns, and I coordinate the statewide ASCWA, statewide virtual reference cooperative, and I also do the social media for the state library. So glad to be here.
And my name is Tuesday Chambers. I am the Ballard High School librarian at Seattle Public Schools. And so this is my 21st year in education. I started out as a teacher and then became a librarian. And I think I have the best job in the world. So I think all librarians have the best job in the world. I especially have the best job. So I am so lucky because I get to work with 1,900 students every day. So I've worked in middle schools, I've worked in a high school. I was the Washington State Teacher Librarian of the Year for 2019. I presented at multiple conferences, and I'm really excited to be here because I want all of you, if you're not currently a librarian, to become one. And if you know somebody else that should become one, then let's chat. So, and I think I'm the last one on the docket. So we're moving from here.
All right, I think now we're going to start jumping into some questions for our great panelists. And as Brianna said, please feel free to enter questions in the chat at any time. We can answer questions throughout the session and or at the end, either way is fine. We all love libraries, that's why we're here. We're really excited to share our enthusiasm and hopefully you will find it informative. My first question is the main theme of our session today, which is Why work in a library? What are some of the opportunities and benefits of working in libraries? And to our panelists, why are you so passionate about libraries and library work?
I can start. And I forgot to mention in my intro, before my 2 years at the State Library, I spent 15 years in adult services in public libraries, specifically at the Olympia branch of the Timberland Regional Library. So for me, one of the biggest things that's been amazing working in libraries is all of the talented, creative, kind, supportive colleagues I've had over the years. That's just been a constant, no matter what library I've worked in or what kind, including my brief stints in academic libraries during library school, public library, and now the state library. And then the incredible just variety of projects and work, even though, the different kinds of libraries I worked at have been very different. But, in a public library, I had the chance to work the desk, plan and attend outreach events, teach tech and business research classes to adults, be a part of community organizations like the Hispanic Roundtable of the South Puget Sound and the Latinx Youth Summit Planning Committee, organize and host programs, creating specialized resources like for different community groups. And so, that's just, how could that be boring? There's just always some new project. There's always incredible people to work with. Public libraries exist to serve our communities, and our communities are always changing. And so, that work is never going to end. It's never going to stagnate. We're always going to have lots of room for improvement. And so you really get to use your mind in our field, I think. And then, the same now that I'm in library development, which is kind of more behind the scenes and focused a little more on serving other libraries. It's still the same with, I mentioned my different projects that I work on as part of the state library. There's just always something new and a new problem to try and solve. Generally wonderful to work with. So that's my pitch.
I can jump in next. Really just kind of echoing everything Sarah said, but I think for me, before I became the executive director of WLA and also doing the grant management with Web Junction for the last, 4 years now with them, I was in public libraries for 13 years. And from everything from a very small rural library to a fairly large city library. And for me, the passion in libraries comes from working with the community and the community. There's so many aspects of the community that you get to work with when you're in a library. Like, to me, the library is the center of the community, whether it's the public library, the school libraries, and it sounds corny, but just like the lives you get to touch when you're a librarian and working with the community. I can, remember being at my first library and having like the little kid when he was 2 or 3 years old coming and sitting on my lap to scan his own books. And 10 years later, he's going into middle school, and you can see that growth and be a part of that. And then for me, after going from that front facing public service to now working for libraries instead of being in them, I get to work with those people that are making that impact on the community, and I get to help them help their communities. And that's just a huge thing for me. And that's, I think, where my passion is just what we can do with the community. And we do so much for children, for youth, for adult programming, and it's just a really amazing way to give back and to have that kind of community connection.
And I echo what everyone else said, but I want to talk a little bit about school libraries. Why I'm so passionate about them is because I think all of us that have had an experience in school. And so some positive, some negative. And so I really want to talk about, just like Brianna said, the community is the center. Your library should be the heart of the school. And so when we talk about students coming every day to school, how do their lives change because of you? And then how does your life change with the colleagues you work with, meaning the teachers and the admin? And then what is the way the library permeates the entire community, right? How does that imprint? How does that library become our library, not a library, right? And so I think when we talk about schools, and this year I think is unique, and it's, we all more than ever understand the impact. And now more than ever, we're in people's classrooms in ways that we haven't been before. But I think when you think about what you want to do with your life and how you want to make like that connection with others and that impact on others, and how you want to show the work you've done, I just can't imagine a better job than school libraries. Like library work is so, and like Sarah said, it's different every day. You're sharing new information. You're working with different people. I'm very rarely seated, right? There's a lot of action. So in school libraries, you're walking around, you're moving, you're doing reading advocacy, you're making things, you're creating things, you're sharing things. I mean, so I think what I love most about my position is that the days are not the same, yet I have the same kind of connections. I'm allowed to have opportunities to create connections over long periods of time. So I appreciate that.
Oh, Sarah, you might be muted. Yeah, thank you.
Is that better?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. I had some externals that were probably not working, so thank you very much. So I think I would really echo what everyone has said. There's not a single part I don't absolutely agree with, and I'm probably, I may be the most senior member of the panel. I think I started, first time I had a library type job was in 1985, and the first professional children's library, although I didn't have a degree. So that's the other part too. There's lots of opportunities, although getting a degree is important. So in, more than 30 years of service. And I think one of the things I would echo about is that it is never boring in all the different things I've done, from youth services to administration in a public library or with the state libraries. It's always exciting opportunities. And some of the best parts is we get to choose those opportunities. I mean, much of the work is fairly standard and understood, but based just on what Sarah was saying, is that you get to know your community and you get to serve your community in a way that is impactful for that community. And it might be very different in a city library or a rural library or a school library. So I think that that's a really important part. I don't like to be bored, and I really love change. So I think that that's a great opportunity. The other things that people said was about impact. And I can't tell you enough about, especially as you look over a career that's been, some significant years of you can really see impact. So if some of the, some of you might have heard of a librarian that named Josh Hannigarney, who wrote The World's Strongest Librarian. I don't know if you haven't read that, it'd be a really good, you would enjoy it. He's currently working, I think, at Salt Lake City. But he was a kid in my library. His mother brought him in. She actually had quite a few children. I think it was either 6 or 7. We had some friendships, personally. My husband actually worked at the same place. But anyway, the point of this story is, and Josh is very forward about this, is he suffered from Tourette's. And that was so he was a student in my library for his entire life. From a small child to an adult, and it was pretty serious. And you can imagine what kind of issues that came about from Tourette's, from visiting a library, and reactions of other librarians and patrons and kids. And he will tell you in his book that libraries became really a saving place and an incredibly important place to him as a way where he was safe and secure. So I don't take any credit for that, except for that what we do every day is to make everyone welcome, everyone, and that means lots of different places that people come from, things that they're dealing with, and I think that's the part that has always really made it important to me, is that people come to us intentionally. There are so many other public services, government services that you must go to, that you're required to go to, or it's essential for some kind of activity. But for us, we're very, very essential, but we're opt-in. People choose us. And I think that makes us very special. And I think that also makes us very important. And so I think if there is a public service job and you have that, like to help people, and you would like to see what that impact is, librarian work in all of its aspects. Just, yeah, also sometimes you just do support services that make all the public services work, but it's a very, very rewarding career. And I've just had the time of my life, and I've always felt so very blessed to work in a profession that I love.
Thank you all. I agree very much with everything you said, all of you, about community and impact, and the library is a gathering place. One thing that I will add is that I always learn something every day. Not only is it different, but I work with mostly teens and tweens and young adults, and I learn so much from the really brilliant young people that I work with, and I get to see them making, you know, social change and creating justice in their community. So that's one of the highlights of this job for me, as well as getting to connect people with information, getting to promote reading for enjoyment, just for the fun of it. And then I also run some programs at the library. I coordinate a homework help program and college prep programs, and some paid teen internships and that sort of thing. But I think I learn as much as, you know, as our library patrons do, you know, from the questions that people ask. So that's really a highlight. So my next question is kind of, delving a little more into the nitty gritty. Some of you have already addressed some of this, but I'm wondering if any of you would be willing to talk a little bit more about what library work entails. Tell us a little more about the library work you do, or some of the work available in your organization, the other types of jobs available in libraries.
Mine's probably going to be the most simple, in that you all know what schools are like, and then my track is different than theirs, so that'll be easy, and y'all can expand. So in my world, in schools, typically what happens in a typical day is we get there early before school starts, not COVID time, and then we share, right? We do tutoring, we make it the space that is the most diverse in the whole school. Right? Because every single student in the school should feel like they are connected to the library, and it's their home base. And then we end up spending a lot of time teaching. So if you like the idea of teaching, co-teaching with different colleagues, and thinking about like, how can I share information, and you not getting to necessarily choose that, right? Because you're co-teaching. So do you like being like together and then co-teaching with students, right? Like, so other people sharing that load of what is going to make learning the most exciting. And so learning being, you know, kind of a more formal space than just, you know, just on your own. So, and then having lots of free time. How do you make free time fun? So spending a lot of time at lunch, competing with everything in the universe that makes students want to do something else, right? But they choose you, they choose your space, they choose your makerspace activities, your club, your enrichment. And then after school, making sure that you have a space that's safe for everyone, that they feel not only represented, but advocated for, right? So that's a big part of school libraries. And then in terms of kind of my organization, then there's a school librarian in almost every school in Seattle. In different parts of our state, you may or may not have a school librarian in every school. It may have different requirements. But then what ends up happening is you kind of have a little autonomy over your space. So you're part of a greater organization, meaning your district, but that's kind of your home base and where you have most locus of control. So I can't remember if I answered all the questions, but I think that was probably, people know the most about school librarians. But now you get the hot and juicy of all the ways that it can go in public.
Oh, goodness. Well, my day-to-day life in work right now is very different than it used to be, say 5 or 6 years ago. But I've done a lot of different things in public libraries. I started as a circulation assistant, which means, the person that you go up to the desk who checks out your books usually. And I did that. I was what's called a page, which you may also know as a shelver. So I was the person that was putting all the books away, which honestly I absolutely loved because of just my organizational kind of way of thinking. Plus it was always really nice for me to be able to go in the back and be to see the impact I had, oh, I shelved 7 carts today and there's no more left. So that was always really gratifying. And then I worked my way up to being a reference librarian, mostly in adult services. With that, that's an interesting day because you just never know what's going to happen on the reference desk. You never know what questions somebody is going to come at you with, whether it's how many gallons are in Lake Mead, or just, needing help or high school kids coming in looking for research help and primary sources for their research papers. So you really just run the gamut of just different things on the reference desk. And with that, I also, we have the summer reading program, which you probably know of a lot, usually for youth and children, but, adult summer reading programs are getting really popular. So I got to do that for a while and run those. So it's just, a really just range of things. Every day is different. You could be processing books or doing displays. Oh, I loved doing displays in the public library. That was my favorite. So picking books for display, making book lists, it's just, there's just a range of things to do. My day-to-day work life now is not as exciting for you to hear about, but dang it, I love it a lot. So, but like I said, now my day-to-day work is making sure that I can support the librarians and the library staff doing their jobs. So that's kind of my day-to-day.
Well, I can go ahead and go next. And, it's funny because my day-to-day is different because it's like this. My meetings are online, but day-to-day for a very long time for me has been about meetings. And as an administrator, I think it is very rewarding because the work that I do, I know makes that the work that's right up front with students and patrons and people possible. So in general, when you're in administration, you're really handling people and buildings and money, and all 3 of those things make all the other stuff possible. So as you get more management in a career, then those are really going to be the things that you do. But I wouldn't at all want anyone to think that those are boring, because this is a profession where you can really see the work that you do, the impact that it has. And I like to think as an administrator or director in every position that I have, that my role is to take away barriers. So if people come to me wherever it is and said, I can't do this and I want to, then it's my role to figure out whatever those barriers are. Are they a policy issue? Are they a funding issue? Are they a, we need to get along better issue, a team issue? So it's, it is my #1 role to take down those barriers to make sure that good work can happen. And that is very, very, very rewarding in itself. And in particular, I mean, I like to think that I always look at this in a fair and equitable way. And, in the state library world, where our patrons are, in development, we service libraries to serve in some, in their areas that they do, mostly publics, but all other types. But we're also, a research library, and we support state government, and that is critically important too. So same thing is true about all of them. How do I use whatever skills and influence and advocacy that I have to make sure that we have the money and the buildings and the people and the books to make this work for everybody. So, day to day, it's just managing all of those things. There are always competing priorities. And I actually think it was, years ago, well before he was president, that President Biden said, show me your budget and I'll show you your priorities. And I think that's something that we fight against all the time, because wherever we are sometimes not seen as the most important thing to fund. But if we do our advocacy well, then when people show budgets, then they can show that they're supporting libraries and library services. So it's day to day is really again, it is never boring, and it's it's very very rewarding. And I started my career, as I mentioned, as a youth services librarian, and I love that. Story time and programs, and just really seeing kids blossom and grow and find that place where they're safe and secure. And I used to joke after I left children's librarianship to be a director that people didn't tell me they love me anymore, because when you're a children's librarian, lots of people tell you they love you, and it's that doesn't happen quite as much anymore, but it does occasionally. So anyway, it's that's what day to day is, I think, for any typical administrator.
I think it was like the director of New York Public Library that I heard say once that called their library, or just a public library, the People's University. And so like I really did love that kind of day-to-day part of public library work, and that you're doing a lot of one-on-one teaching, like whether it's kind of quick at the desk or scheduling longer sessions with folks. And that again, it's that kind of opt-in, like we're not telling people what they need to learn or even how. We're kind of working with folks one-on-one to tailor, like, what is your information need? How can I help you do it? And a lot of times you are just learning along with folks. Like there's always a new device that you don't personally have or use at work, but you're going to help them figure it out together, even if you've never done it. And so that kind of day-to-day can be really rewarding, because again, you see the difference it makes to folks, like to be able to like suddenly be able to use their ebook reader, which means they can read any book in the size they need the font to be, and opens up a whole new world that way. Or they need to, their phone's frustrating them and they need it to for pretty much every aspect of their life. And so you can actually, it does take a lot of patience and kindness, and there's definitely challenges with teaching, but it's pretty meaningful work. And then my day-to-day now is so interesting and different, being that all behind the scenes. It's like my job is pretty much, even before, there was some physical traveling before, but even before COVID, it's like, I kind of could have worked anywhere on a laptop kind of thing, because so many of my projects, like the Washington State Book Awards, the Washington State Zine Contest, so much of it can be done like meeting about it online, the software migration project, that was a whole year-long event for ASQA last year. It's a lot of work just online, but so that's a huge difference between the public library, where like Tuesday you're hardly ever sitting down versus almost always being on the computer. Like when I switched, I had to get like a yoga ball to sit on because I wasn't as active as I was at the public library. It was a big change. So it's a little bit about the day-to-day.
Thank you all so much. In addition to all the things you said, I will add that in the public library, we do a lot of community outreach and engagement and community listening, and hopefully listening to what people in our local community need from the library or don't need from the library, and then kind of adapting to that. So that's another part of our job, in addition to being in the library. And as Tuesday said, lots of getting our steps in every day, very active. So my next question for our panelists is about how to get a job working in a library. What qualifications, education, or experience are needed to work in a public or school library or the Washington State Library? And this could be an entry-level or librarian position. And we had a specific question in advance from a participant who asked, do you need a degree to become a librarian, or are there alternate routes?
Oh, can I take this one first? This is I love this question. Let's back up to the first part of what qualifications and what the opportunities are in getting into a library. I think and this sort of goes with The question that's in chat, I don't know if everybody else saw it, from Bethany about the best piece of advice working in a library, entering into the field. So I'm going to kind of wrap that into this whole answer because I love Bethany's question too. I think when it comes to entering the field, I think that knowing what libraries do is the biggest thing. I can remember when I started my graduate program, and I'll get into degrees in a second too, that my academic advisor had asked me if I had any experience working in a library. And I was like, oh yeah, I've done this, this, and this. And she was like, well, that's great because half of your cohort will have never worked in a library before. And I was like, oh, okay. I was a bit taken aback by that. But I'm not saying that you need to work in a library to get that experience, but at least knowing what the field does. I think that there's still that misconception that librarians are sitting at the desk reading all day and they're shushing you when you walk in the door. And that is something that we are still fighting against, I think. Hopefully, like you're kind of getting from this panel that we're not like that. But, you know, just kind of, and the best way I would recommend kind of getting in is if you're looking at like the public library, there's a lot of volunteer opportunities, not obviously right now, I don't think, when it comes to the pandemic, but when those opportunities start opening up, like look for ways that you can volunteer. Being a page, like I mentioned before, the shelver position is a phenomenal step in the door with getting into a library. And high school students can do that. We had high school kids that were pages at our library. And I will tell you that being a page, you are often the first point of contact for patrons. You know that library so well because you're shelving books, you know where everything is, you know the floor plan, you know the flow. Your experience as a shelver is invaluable to your leadership in the library, like because you know that building probably better than anybody does. And I advocate for pages a lot just because, you know, I think that they're looked at as maybe one of the lower level positions, but it's absolutely not. So I always say, look for the page positions. It's a great step in the door that can really kind of lead to other things. When it comes to working in the field for long term, going to Bethany's question, the best piece of advice about working in the field, I personally say, is just to never lose your sense of curiosity, never lose your desire to learn. Don't be afraid of change. There's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of changes that are happening in the library, especially. So, you know, embrace that. And just be willing to be open to that and to continue to learn. I don't think I totally answered everything, but that's sort of my pitch for getting in and staying in.
I could go ahead and go, and I think one of the things I would think about is, you know, I agree with everything that has said, but you might also have some skills that could be used in, and you mentioned volunteer, so certainly in-place volunteer, but often a friends group or any kind of support organization might also need help. Maybe you could help with web page development, or you know, like be a treasurer, those kind of things with a, you know, an auxiliary support organization, or even sometimes a library itself. Can get you known to folks and can be on your resume as actual, you know, when a person is reviewing the resume for looking for if there is experience. And then also make sure that experience that you do have, many places use systems that help sort people. So the state uses a system called NeoGov, and that's a pretty common system across lots and lots of organizations. So, and it's really important to read the questions well and to make sure you answer the questions and use the language that they're looking for. I don't know that very many are automated, but sometimes they are. So if you're not hitting the answers to the questions, and the other thing that might be sad but is true, those could very well be the evaluation that's seen more than your resume or your cover letter. So really pay attention to that, and it won't format beautifully. And that will frustrate you, but it's okay. Just make sure that you You know, if they ask you for public service experience, make sure you talk about if you worked, you know, in a bookstore or any store or any place where the competencies and the things that you're doing well will translate well. Because in all places, we're probably going to get a lot of applications, and we have to sort, and we'll have to bring people to the top that will get to come interview and show their skills. And some other folks will stay underneath there and might not be seen, even though they are really, really great candidates. So just don't underestimate that application process, so that you can get front and center in you know, in being. And then I think the other thing too is we really, I'm a big supporter of going to library school. I've taught at both University of North Texas and San Jose, and I think it's, you know, it really is the best way to get a library degree for the long run of the library profession. But remember, there's lots of other things too. We do a lot of PR, so it might be a bigger system, but there's oftentimes people in public relations and outreach that don't have a degree that might not be required. There's human resources that would not require a library degree. There's financial things that you know, supports positions that helps with finance. So there are a number of different ways to do it, and you could do that and then make sure you love it and then go back to school. Lots of people go back to school part-time. So there's just a million ways to get in the door, and just be passionate about it and don't ever sell yourself short.
There are a couple of different ways to be a librarian in schools. So you don't have to start with a degree in libraries. I also want to shout out to all the high school students out there who, or if you know of any high school students, there are TA positions, and there are ways you can get CTE credit. So if you are younger and you are still in high school or you're in college, there are ways that you can actually get credits for working in libraries. So specifically, also, I know that I have direct fieldwork students at the University of Washington work in my library for credit. I know that, and like Sarah just said, if you're thinking that your passion, your thing you're on about might be the very thing that gets you hired in a library, right? If you came to me right now, we're like, oh my gosh, I'm totally into mushrooming. I knew all the ways to study it, and I have this online system. And oh, by the way, I mentioned I have all these ways that I grow mushrooms, and I have a makerspace opportunity for your kids and your students. And I'd be like, what? Oh my gosh, that's amazing, right? And then I'd want to bring you in. So I just think that I hate saying I know everyone needs money. I know that, and I know that time is the most important resource we have. And so I know volunteering is so hard. But every opportunity you get to talk to a librarian, ask if there's a way to help, find out what they need support in, whether it is shelving books or bringing in mushrooms so that students can identify them and possibly become a mycologist, right? Like any way you can get your passion sort of aligned with what your librarian or libraries are doing, I think is really important. And I want to say this especially because libraries don't look like they used to. They just don't, especially school libraries. So, and I can say public libraries, I'm a big user of them. So if you go into my library right now, not now, this is COVID, but in general, there's like this gentle hum, right? That's going on. Cause it's like a good restaurant, right? You're coming in, there are people all over doing the things they're excited about. So there's podcasting going on in one room. People are sewing in another room. Students are sitting around a puzzle in another room. Students have a Jenga competition going in on the side by the window. And that's the energy that kind of comes with the school library. And actually, and maybe not that often, but almost in my university district library, public library. So there's a lot of energy, and it's that energy that makes people want to be there. And Sarah was so smart when she said people choose to come, right? We don't require anyone to buy anything. We don't sell anything. We don't do any of that. We're about people's passions, people's energies, being in a place where people like them can come and they are represented. So the books on the shelves, to the posters on the wall, to the activities you see, to the programming we do, we want to have that represented. So what I am saying to you all is live your passions, talk to librarians. As a librarian, I have a teaching certificate, but I have a library endorsement. I wish I had an MLA. I wish I did. And someday I'll probably go back and get one, but that's how I entered the field. And I know schools around the state have different ways that they serve their school communities with libraries. So I would highly recommend looking into them.
So one thing I would just quickly add for advice, I think, on applying is just to be specific about, even though I know you might be applying to many different places and every option you get, but if you can just in your cover letter or somewhere get real specific about what appeals to you about that specific library, it shows that you've done some research, that you know something about that library, and that, you know, it just kind of, it's stuck. That's the kind of thing that would stick out to me when I was reviewing. I'm not a part of hiring at the state library, but was at the public library I worked at. And then I did also see a question about academic libraries in the chat. And I didn't actually end up going into academic libraries, but my own path was that I got my undergraduate degree at Evergreen. And then I took a few years off working and saving some money to be able to get new loans for grad school. But while I was doing that, I did volunteer at the reference desk at Evergreen with the librarians there, just trying to get my feet in the water and make sure it was something I wanted to pursue, but just obviously learn from the librarians who let me hang out with them and learn some academic reference. And then when I ended up moving to Chicago for library school, I did get to be a student teacher at kind of satellite schools of both the University of Chicago and Northwestern University in their little downtown satellite libraries. And so, you know, I actually got paid to be in academic libraries there and learn a bit more. At the beginning, I wasn't sure if I wanted to take the academic or public. And you don't really need to be sure about that as you enter library school, I don't think. And so I obviously ended up going the public route, but it always has been kind of a mix of like volunteering and then just getting my foot in the door wherever I could for me, because it's even once I came back to Olympia, I got a job at the state library just fixing congressional records. It wasn't a agreed position, but I just wanted to get into a library. And while I was doing that, I volunteered at the Olympia library helping to teach computer classes. So when the librarian I was helping moved on, I actually ended up getting her position. So it was kind of always a mix of volunteer, getting in the door, getting to know people. And, you know, once they've worked with you, they can see that, you know, what kind of employee you'd be. So definitely do whatever you can to get in.
Great. Thank you all so much. I was actually equivalent of a page at a library in a public library in California is how I started. And then I got my MLIS degree, which is Masters of Library and Information Science, if anybody doesn't know. For most of the librarian jobs in a public library, you are required to have that degree first, which is usually about approximately 2 years after your undergraduate degree. But as Sarah Jones said, there's many other jobs within the library, entry level and otherwise, you know, as she mentioned, human resources, finance, IT, marketing, web design, safety, facilities. So there's all kinds of event services. There's all kinds of non-librarian jobs within the public library. And as far as making yourself a stronger applicant, I really like what everybody said. As Sarah said, really get to know, do some research on the library that you're applying for, I think is great. Great advice. Find out what libraries in general do, but specifically the community in the library that you're applying. If you know a little bit about that community, that really sets you apart. And one thing I also often tell students is use your own library experience when you're applying for a job and interviewing and filling out an application or resume. Sometimes people forget that, but it's like, oh wait, you know, grew up at the library and you participate in a lot of programs. You have actual first-person experience, you know, as a participant in these library activities. So be sure and list that and mention that, as well as I think someone mentioned, you know, any customer service or retail job that you've done, because we don't just sit around and read books all day. We work with people, all of that sort of job, and even, you know, caring for younger siblings and babysitting is actually, you know, work that's working with young people. It's, you know, getting along with people, troubleshooting. So that is actually experience for working, at least in a public library. It's really quite strong experience. So that was something else that I wanted to mention. And now I think Tuesday, you mentioned a little bit about this, which is great. We had a specific question about what do you recommend in regards to networking and making connections in order to get a job in the library. And so I was wondering if anybody else had anything further to mention about networking in advance of getting a library job. And then also someone had an advanced question about what is the typical salary in the library field? If anyone can speak to that one as well. And do you think it's sustainable economically? Good question.
So the first question was, remind me the.
Oh, I'm sorry, it was networking. Do you have any
Okay.
suggestions?
It escaped right out of my head, but I had a good answer. I think you're doing the right thing right here. The library associations are one of the best places to do networking. We're online in this environment, but that's going to get changed up. And I think the WLA conference may be a mixed hybrid, but what we're hearing right now, maybe it'll be in person. Students can often get a pretty good discounted rate to come to the conference. Sometimes you can volunteer. I don't know, those of you more deeply engaged with WLA, but it's at our California Library Association. We needed lots of volunteers, work a registration desk, all kinds of things like that. So networking where we are is a really smart and good thing to do. So join this association if you haven't. And again, that's usually a rate that's pretty reasonable. Go to, like some programs are great, but if you can be where librarians themselves are doing their own professional work, that would be really a great way to do it. And then I'll just jump to the last one and give other people space. But the salaries are they're okay. They're steady and stable, and you get good. Usually get good retirement and insurance and things like that. For a master's degree, we're not. There's no woohoo. We're making lots of money because we have a master's degree. But you get so much in return for that. And they're very aligned with the cost of living. So the higher the cost of living, the higher the salary is going to be, but you're going to have that proportional issue with that. I really, really recommend folks, if you have ability to move and could go to maybe a smaller location, you'll get, actually, there's really good opportunity there, because say you go to a smaller mid-sized library, you might be able to be lots of different roles, children's, adults, administration, and management. And you go to a very big system and it's harder to get up those ladders. So I would really recommend some folks to, if you have the ability to move and can go to, a smaller or more rural locations, there's really good ways to get incredible experience.
I would love to jump in on this question. Just, people might know a little bit more about WLA and what we've got going on. I think I know a little bit that I can share. Yes, as far as the conference goes, yes, that is such a great suggestion. Conference for us, kind of maybe to back up a couple steps. Librarians have a lot of conferences. We love conferences. We love learning, and that's a really good way to get together and do that. The state conferences, usually every state association has some kind of conference, professional development opportunity. WLA does one annually. We also have some other events like this throughout the year. Our conference is in the fall. It's scheduled in October, and it is currently scheduled to be in person. There will be some virtual elements to go along with that, especially just because not only virtual is just a great way to reach more people. It also is helpful for accessibility and maybe folks that wouldn't be able to travel or choose not to. So we want to make sure that we're getting the farthest reach and being as accessible as possible. But as far as networking is concerned, the association is a great place to do that. Student rates for us are $20 a year. And as a student, you get access to all of our listservs. There was a comment in chat from Jacob about the list section, which is the library and information student section. So that's all of our library and information students in the association that have their own group, and they do networking and supporting each other. So definitely look at conferences, associations. It's also a really good place if maybe you're feeling a little like, maybe you're a little introverted and not really sure how to get involved. It's a really good place to go because there's often mentorship opportunities. There's buddy systems at the conference, like first time, like conference buddies that can help you sort of learn the ropes and introduce you to people. Because if you're feeling a little introverted and not sure how to go about that, there's always somebody like me or like Tuesday or that are very much like, let me go introduce you to people. So we will help you out for sure. So there's always those people there.
I'll just add one quick networking opportunity too into the chat. I'm also, one of my other hats is vice chair of the Special Libraries Division of WLA, and we're doing a series of called The Secret Life of Special Libraries. We recorded one on law libraries in the state recently, and in June we've got one where we get to tour 3 tribal libraries in the state. And so that's just, we'll do the tours, and then afterwards folks have like actual time to network, speak with each other, break out into small groups, learn about what everyone does from day to day. And so that's a great opportunity too to meet some folks in Washington. And there's it's open to the public. You don't have to be a member to see that.
And not to be forgotten, y'all have internet and you all have social media. So, and if you don't have social media, you need to. So if you're like, I don't do social media is doing you, okay? So at this point in time, you cannot have one for your personal life, that's up to you. But professionally, you need social media. You just do. I'm sorry. So some of the best learning I get is from across the world, really, but across the nation. And so I highly recommend you follow all of us who are on here, or at least our organizations, and that would be Twitter, Instagram. I'm starting a TikTok. In terms of serving my population, to not have an active TikTok is like my bad. Okay, so that really and truly, social media needs to be on your radar. And if nothing else, you're teaching people. People are literally going to come to your library and be like, how do I do this? So you should know how. Anyway, or at least a bit. And then to echo what Sarah Jones said, if you're like, I don't think I want to be a school librarian, but you're like, I can't get a gig anywhere else. School libraries offer direct fieldwork experience right now, which I think many public libraries are not because of COVID. And so when people come to my library and they're like, I don't think I want to be a school librarian Chambers, but I need but I need some experience. I'm like, I'm gonna throw you in all of it. You're gonna be teaching, you're gonna be doing makerspace, you're gonna be checking out, you're gonna be shelving, you're gonna be processing, you're gonna be doing curation. I'm like, right? I give it all, right? And then they turn around and get a job at a Freda, right? Right on. Freda's tidy, but guess what? She's out there doing everything too. And then she's working to get years and years and years of experience. She's kind of fallen in love with the town, right? And so you might fall in love with a little town in the middle of somewhere. And so you've got this experience. So even though you're like, I don't know if I want to, that's okay. You don't have to know. I still don't know everything I want to do. But to not get those opportunities is bonkers. So I would recommend getting every opportunity you can, because the librarian life is, there's like so many things we do, that to have experience to be able to go into an interview or be able to apply on an application and say, I did this work, right? And be able to, then automatically your resume goes up, right? Goes up because you have a skill set that we need. And so, and to be able to feel confident in speaking to it is super important. Like right now, I feel like I could interview for jobs that I may or may not have the qualifications for, but I certainly have the experience for. And so I think that's key too.
Great. Thank you all so much for those great networking suggestions. And I did bring something. I'm going to try to share my screen. If that doesn't work, I'll give up. But I believe we can email this to all the participants who signed up for this free session. And it is I know for students, this is understandably very important to sometimes know the specifics of things. So if you all can see this, panelists, can you see it okay? Good. This is just a list of Seattle Public Library. Obviously, it's going to differ within different public library systems and different types of libraries. But in addition to the range of types of jobs, I just wanted to show you that an entry level job for high school students, which we call student assistants, is between $16.69 and $19.69 an hour. And for a page, or what we call a library associate 1, this is in 2021, starts at $21.43 an hour and goes up to almost $25 an hour. There's also library associate 2 and 4. So some of these are entry-level jobs. And the library associate 4 goes from $30 to $35 an hour. And for a librarian, starts at $36 an hour and goes up to $42 an hour. And there's different types of librarians as well, even within the public library, that you can make more money with those. There's managers, supervisors, managing librarians. There's collections librarians who help order the books for our whole library system. There are systems librarians who have a lot of computer experience, and there's people who are more like archivists who help, even in a public library, although it's more common in a special library, they help preserve and protect rare and older documents and books and even objects that have historical significance. So there's lots of variety even within the librarian job. So I just wanted to share that because I know a lot of students ask me, some of the specifics of what can I expect to make right off the bat, if I apply for a library job. And that's an idea this year in the public library in Seattle of what you would be making. So I'm going to jump into. Oh, yes.
I have a quick question. I got a private chat. If you could maybe quickly say what the difference is between a library associate versus a librarian.
Sure, absolutely. Our library associate 1 in the public library is similar to a page, and they do a lot of shelving of books, pulling of books for people's holds, checking in books, processing them, that sort of thing. Library associate 2 typically works with library accounts, so they help sign up people for library cards and troubleshoot any problems on their accounts, help them assisted checkout of books. Anything related to the checking out of books and other materials. A library associate 4, at least at Seattle Public Library, does many of the similar jobs to a librarian. They do a lot of information or reference services, so answering people's questions. In some library systems, they do a lot of programming, programs with youth or with adults. So that one usually requires some more library experience. The librarian job, like I said, at Seattle Public Library, you do need to have a library degree for that, but it involves a number of the different jobs that I was mentioning. But for the page job and often the LA1 and LA2 job, you usually do not have to have any library experience, and in fact, most people don't when they apply. So like Tuesday was saying, and Brianna and others, get as much experience as you can, but it's not necessarily required that you have a paid job in a library before you start. So does that kind of answer the question, hopefully? All right, do we have any more questions from chat, or should I jump into our next panel question? Okay, I will go into our next one. To our panelists, what are some steps you think we can take to advance equity within the library profession? To be specific, within the field of librarianship, how can we work towards more diversity and representation, specifically of BIPOC employees, LGBTQIA employees, that more closely reflect the communities that we work in? Sorry, that was kind of a mouthful of a question, but I'm sure some of you have something to say about that.
I'd be happy to start if that's okay. I think this is something I've been deeply engaged in and care about for really, I hope my whole career. And it's a challenge because we, are in the high 80% of women and white women. So the vast majority, and I think we're, that is the vast majority of the library profession. And there's a lot of reasons for that. It starts kind of because women really started libraries, long ago. But I think the way we change that is we need to change a number of things. We have to recruit people. I think as we talk about recruiting people to come in and start in jobs, we can't expect people to go out and get a bachelor's degree and then a master's degree and then start a career. I think we need to start really being serious about getting people into the all the positions that were mentioned, whether it's, just starting as shelving or library associates, 1s, 2s, 3s, and then really support them in whatever education thing that looks like. Do they need to finish the 4-year degree? Do they need to get a master's program? And I think we had some real luck in the last place I was working in the Bay Area, and we weren't any different, even though and it's true in Washington too. You have a diverse population, which has just been tough to get this profession to be diverse. I think the number one thing that folks, when we were working on it with real intention, was that you need to be a welcoming place. It has to be a place where folks feel welcome and supported. They will have issues. There is no doubt that there is systemic racism. There's all kinds of other issues that people have to deal with. So you have to be supportive. And the more folks you can have so that they can have not only just white allies, but other allies, the more comfortable that they will feel. So it is a long road, and not one that we just care about now, but we need to care about for forever. And I think one of the best successes we had in the last organization was by starting to be that welcome. So we would get people to apply from diverse backgrounds in all means because we had diversity. So we had a branch manager, an African-American woman. She worked at Marin County for over 20 years, and she was the first person of color to ever be a manager. So when I left, we had 6 people at that level, and we were 4 of them were people of color. So it's intentionality, and it's welcoming, and it's supporting them, because as I said, the issues will come, the microaggressions, the macroaggressions, the constant troubles, and just living in environments. So we have to really change the narrative of being supportive, and not just recruiting, but supporting people once we recruit them.
Well, I know we're getting towards the end of our session. Did any of our panelists have anything else they wanted to comment on that question, or any other of the questions before we wrap up?
The only thing I'll say is creating opportunities, right?
Yes.
Like, so much of what Sarah said, like, I have a bunch of students in my high school, and one of my capstone students, 3 of them were like, we want to look specifically at LGBTQ, like the volumes you have on the shelf, how can we make more accessible? We did a survey, and their whole focus is LGBTQIA resources and how to make them more accessible. And so when I was sharing this with my Pride Book Club, they're like, wait, that's a job? And I'm like, well, all librarians care about this. But yeah, it's a job. Like, it's kind of niche, but like, yeah, but we all want this to be part. And they're like, wait, how do they do that? How do they make that their focus in school? I'm like, well, they decided that this is their passion, and they're already in libraries, and they were like, can they come and talk to us? And so it was like, so you don't know what you don't know, right? You don't know what's not known. You don't know what's out there. You don't. So I keep going back to, it's hard to envision if you can't see it, right? It really is. And so making those opportunities available in the school libraries, where more and more students see possibilities, see themselves, see other people, see new ways of doing it, and in providing that space. I think libraries, one of their greatest gifts is providing space that may not exist in other places. And so whether that means holding you know, the Black Student Union in your library and that being the space that you provide them so they have a safe space that they can, if that means finding librarians who are doing this work with LGBTQ queer authors, if that means, whatever it means, from your displays to whatever, but the intentionality of that and then the transparency of explaining it to students in my role is really important.
And just a very quick thing with that. I think that, you know, what Sarah said and what Tuesday just said were just so like beautifully complementary. Like those are just two like things that just will work really well together. Not only just, and Sarah mentioned it before about barriers. It's not only about creating opportunities, but removing those barriers and creating the opportunities, the recruitment, the support, and the retention. So that's the big one, and it all just kind of goes together. And I just, yeah, they said it much more eloquently than I could, but that's spot on. So.
I put in the chat just a resource I had found recently called Disrupting Whiteness in Libraries and Librarianship, a reading list, and there's a lot of great work and in that list. And yeah, I mean, I think also just acknowledging the institutional and structural racism that can be found in libraries and every other institution in our culture, and not thinking it's not there. You know, most public libraries in this country have like a history of segregation, and when they're built on those structures, they have to be intentionally dismantled. They're not just going to go away. So kind of taking, you know, concrete steps and being transparent about them.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Just because we love libraries, which we do, doesn't mean that there aren't problematic aspects and that there aren't new perspectives that will make them so much better in the future, I think is the hope and the goal. So thank you to all of our panelists so much. And thank you to our participants for joining us today. We really appreciate you coming. I hope this was helpful. And I believe we shared our contact information. Please feel more than welcome to email us. If you have any questions, you can email me anytime. We are happy to hear more from you and hope you might consider libraries as a future career.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone. Once again, thank you to our panelists. Thank you to WLA for putting this on. It was an honor to be on this panel with you all and to share our love for libraries. So thank you so much for being here and spending a little over an hour of your sunny Saturday with us. I do want to thank our Career Lab advisory panel that helped us put on this month-long programming event. Crystal, Jolene, Darcy, Marissa, Elizabeth, and Emily, your service and your ideas and your contributions were invaluable to making this the whole series of events successful. It's not over yet. If you are registered for Career Lab or interested in being registered for Career Lab, the website is up there. Library School 101 is coming up on Monday if you're curious about what library school is like. So you want to work in school libraries. If, like me, Tuesday makes you want to be a school librarian, please come to that panel next week and hear from other school librarians about their life and their days in the schools. And we've got some interview speed dating coming up to help you on those interview experiences. So once again, thank you so much, everyone, our panelists, our attendees. Have a wonderful day and don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions.